Hey, hello folks. With a lot of people with whom I have been interacting over the last couple of weeks, one point which came across very common is that there's always this challenge and this fear of judging self as well as judging others. And all that this really does is it impacts growth. So here is my mind map, and I'm going to take you through some of these pointers in the next probably 20 odd minutes. So let me just get started. So the first point is, what's really the reality? So the reality is that we all are, in a manner of speaking, judgmental, including me. So all that we need to do and all that we need to be conscious about it is to ensure that we are aware at what point are we getting into the boundary line of judging ourselves or judging others. So let's just get deeper into this. So yes, as I said, all of us are, and I think it's human nature. You can't just completely avoid it, but what you can definitely do is you can monitor it, label it appropriately, and then ensure that you are able to manage it in a lot better manner rather than getting deeper into the world of judgment, which actually hinders and impacts growth in a significant manner. Okay, so what's the description of getting into this world of judgment? So what happens is people who are judging self and also who are judging others, they generally have this fault finding mechanism. A lot of times what they do is they start to find fault with themselves, saying, okay, I'm not as good, maybe there's some issue with me, the other person is able to perform a lot better, what is the reason that I'm not able to do well? And they also start to gradually analyze others as well as analyze circumstances. So one of my favorite example at this point in time is pandemic. So there are two different worlds when it comes to pandemic. One world thinks that pandemic has been bad, there are a lot of associated reasons with it, while the other group equally thinks that pandemic has been a gift of opportunity for them. And why do they really say that? Because they have been able to utilize this time in doing a lot of productive things which otherwise in their planned and set routine would have absolutely been impossible. That's what it has really done to them. And what this the world of judging also does is it causes a lot of disappointment. It causes disappointment because when we start to judge ourselves, we start to evaluate and start to question, start to get reasoning, and then all of those things leads to disappointment, anger, shame, guilt, and ultimately a lot of anxiety, which eventually becomes the reason for more and more stress. Okay, so what kind of thoughts that come into anyone's mind, okay, when it comes to judgment? So primarily these are the three kind of questions that comes in. What's wrong with me? And then when people start to evaluate others, what's wrong with the other individual? What is really wrong with this person? Why is this person behaving in a particular manner in which the person is behaving? Or else persons start to reason out the circumstances, situation, or the outcome. Someone hasn't got the outcome that the individual was looking at because it is unfavorable to the kind of output that they were looking at. They start to judge, they start to reason out, saying, okay, why is this something like this? Why is bad thing really happening to them? Now you see, the world is full of people who are at a disadvantage on account of so many things. Maybe some of their body parts is missing. Maybe someone has had a bad childhood. But people who have been successful, if you start to analyze those patterns and those behaviors, you will realize that these are those set of people who have started to evaluate themselves by considering all of those crises and those unfavorable situations as a gift of opportunity. They have looked at things from a completely positive angle, and that's the reason they are there where they really are. Okay, so what's the reason for judging? The reasons for judging are varied, but just to look at a few, these are some of the common forms of judging that comes across. So there's always this sense of insecurity. So when we start to judge others, this is a common phenomena which really comes in when we start to judge others, judge ourselves, saying, okay, suppose someone is not performing very well, probably from a studies point of view, someone who is a working professional, but not getting enough probably achievement as against the planned targets, as against the planned goals, then there's a sense of insecurity. Okay, will my job stay as it is? Or will I really be in a position to clear my exams? Will I be in a position to fulfill my parents' expectations? Blah, blah, blah. So a lot of these kind of things start to come in the mind, and it starts to play games in the mind. Those little voices that starts to come, they start to play games with our own selves, maybe compared to others or even ourselves. Then there's a lack of a sense of scaredness. Not really lack, but it's truly speaking, it's a sense of scaredness. There's something which starts to play in your mind, saying, okay, what if this doesn't happen? What if this doesn't go this way? What will I really do? Will the world end for me? No, not really. So, and that's probably the reason why people also get into depression a lot of times, because they start to feel saying, okay, I have taken the route A, and route A is just for me. There's no plan B, there's no plan C, there's nothing else which can work. Okay, people who judge also, a lot of times it has been observed that they have this sense of isolation. They're not able to share their thoughts with other people. There's a sense of loneliness in their mind, and they need to overcome that, but they don't know how. This debate which keeps running. And then there's a sense of change. So pandemic, the example that I gave, really fits in. Pandemic has really pushed people to come out of their comfort zone, and it has pushed people to ensure that they change to become better, change to acclimatize themselves with respect to the new situation, to the new circumstances. Now, the perfect example here is there are millions of companies across the world who always had a set behavior, a set pattern of working, and they would have been out of business had they not accepted that yes, they have no choice but to encourage and allow employees to work from home. Right? So they have accepted the new norm as the way of working, and you see, all of this with the intent to not just survive but also to equally thrive. Okay, so why does this really happen? When you start to identify why does this really happen, there are multiple reasons. Really start to look at some of the starting point, the triggers. The triggers is the early age conditioning that people typically go through. So a lot of times people have, right from their early childhood days, there are certain triggers, certain thoughts which has been inculcated into their mind, and which is known as early age conditioning. Like for example, if someone has been told saying you are not really good at it, you are not really good at it. So the person has started to accept saying, okay, I'm not good at it and I don't think I can do it. However, there's another school of thought which says that okay, if from the early age, if people are encouraged saying okay, there's nothing that you can't do, anything is possible, you have to just work towards it, you have to persevere, you have to work hard, and you have to practice. It's only practice which can actually as well as eventually make things happen for you. So that's what the early age conditioning does. It generates those thoughts in your mind, and people who are seeded with those early age conditioning, they start to ask these kind of questions. What's wrong with me? What is wrong with you? And what's wrong with the circumstances? So they start to judge anything and everything possible. It is because of the kind of conditioning that they have been through in their early childhood. So a lot of times people carry those thoughts of victimization, which once they have grown up, they still carry those thoughts. But people who consider those things as a gift of opportunity, the people who start to look at those things from a positive angle, they start to evaluate saying whatever has happened, how can they probably pick up some of those snippets and become better for a thriving and an amazing future ahead. So what really happens to self? So when you look at it from an individual perspective, there's this ongoing questioning to self, saying okay, is there any problem? There are mistakes, there are shortcomings, maybe I'm not doing these things well. And they start to compare themselves with others. They start to listen to people who say that okay, you are not as good, probably you could have done better, and things like that. But the manner in which those things comes in, and basis the conditioning that the individual has, the individual only perceives thoughts which the individual desires to perceive in any situation. And that's exactly where the challenge typically comes in. What happens to others? When you look at what happens to others, so when it comes to others, people start to focus saying what is wrong with others. They start to evaluate other people basis their looks, the way they operate, instead of getting into their shoes, instead of getting into the shoes of the other individual and then saying okay, let me understand what background the other individual is really coming in from, let me understand what is his or her upbringing, and let me then evaluate, let me appreciate what the other individual is doing, rather than just getting into critical perspective. So those kind of things really helps when you look at others. But who have this issue of judgment, they always look at things maybe from an inferiority superiority complex, and that's where this entire perspective of inferiority and superiority, it starts to impact an individual's self-image, self-concept, that self-esteem, that entire thing connected to self. People start to judge themselves at that level, and that also becomes an issue. And when it comes to circumstances, what really happens? So people start to look at circumstances saying this is really bad, and why the hell has this happened to me? Why with me when it could have happened with anyone else? So, and that is where the whole challenge connected to resilience and considering those tough situations, challenges, crisis, looking at those things from a much broader perspective and not looking at those situations as something where the situations are forcing that okay, you are bad or your situation is bad, right? So that's the scenario connected with why does this really happen. And now let's look at what it does. So what it does is it beats you up. It beats you up mentally, right? It hits you hard, saying, okay, there are problems with you, there are shortcomings with you, you're not as good, and for the same individual, for example, if it's me, I start to look at other people from a feeling of hurt, okay, and then I start to feel bad for myself, saying, okay, I'm not good. And because I have this judging mentality, I will also start judging other people equally, because if I have this judging mentality, it goes without saying, I look everyone from the sense of judging. And let me tell you, I also had this as a problem. Not that I don't have it today, but today I am able to label it, and I am able to label it extremely clearly, saying, okay, I don't have to get to this route, I don't have to get into judgment, and I have to respect the other individual as is. And let me tell you, I've really been successful in overcoming this to a reasonable extent. So if I can do it, I'm sure you as a viewer, if at all you have this as a challenge, you definitely can do it. It's equally possible for you. Okay, what kind of feelings does it generate? When we look at feelings, let's look at feelings. So although I spoke to right at the beginning, these are the kind of feelings that typically comes in the mind of people. They have this feeling of guilt, regret, okay, shame, saying, okay, I'm not good, disappointment, saying, okay, I have not been able to clear my exam, and this and that, rather than looking at saying, okay, if I have not been able to clear, at least I'm better prepared. I can do much better next time because I am already done and dusted with 1 degree of preparation. And then the starting point of all of these things are anger. People who become short-tempered, people who have that anxiety, they don't feel good about things, they get irritated in a very, very short span of time, they tend to lose that calmness and patience that's really required. So all of those kind of feelings is what typically comes in when people have this judging mentality. Okay, so what's really the approach? So the approach is something which I have read over a period of time, and the first and foremost perspective with respect to the approach is that we have to be curious and we don't have to be really judgmental. Being curious is about being inquisitive, is about asking the right kind of questions, saying, okay, what's really happening, understanding those things, and then most important is monitoring your thoughts. What kind of thoughts are playing in your mind, and then saying, okay, this is the judgment thought, let me just put this aside, let me not really judge. The only thing and the most important thing I would say is managing and monitoring your thought. The moment you are able to monitor your thought, the rest of the process, which I'm going to come to in a while, is manageable once you are able to identify that one important thought. Okay, can this be done with everyone? Yes, 100% it can be done with everyone. What it really takes is, it's all about putting in time and effort into this. So if suppose someone gets into this situation, every now and then, what's important is to monitor those things, give it some amount of time. So the moment you're thinking, close your eyes, think through, take a deep breath and think, saying, okay, yes, this is the thought that I'm having in my mind, let me just come out of it, and then start to monitor those thoughts very quickly. Okay, the next point is follow the process. So what's really the process? So the process is, it's a fourfold process. So dual is DUAL. D stands for don't pass judgment. Now what's very important in D as a dual, which says don't pass judgment, is every time that you are getting into a situation like this, observe your thoughts. Keep reminding yourself, saying, I don't have to judge the individual, I have to just take the situation as is. If you're giving yourself those words, then stop yourself immediately. Stop yourself as well as stop the other individual. If suppose there's some discussion happening and that's where you're getting to judgment, just stop that immediately. I see that these things are happening very, very often also with a lot of students with whom I interact day in, day out. So it's an important message for them, saying just observe your thoughts. Keep reminding yourself that you don't have to get into something like this. The more you are consciously aware about it, the more you will be in a position to manage. A lot of times it happens a lot between relationships within a family, student and their parents, and other other siblings. So these things are very, very common. It can also happen in workplace environment where people start to judge, saying, okay, my boss is like this like that, and they start to critically analyze things rather than getting into the situation and understanding what's really happening at that point in time. Okay, the second part is understand. So instead of judging the individual by their looks, by the way they do things, the best thing is to put yourself into that particular shoe. Understand, okay, if I would have been in this situation, what I would have really done. Can I recommend some of those suggestions? Try to imagine the kind of background that they're going through, the kind of background that they come from. Maybe they didn't have any other choice. That's the reason they're doing things the way things are happening at that point in time and stuff like that. The third point is accept. Okay, accept, the person who he or she really is without trying to change him or her. It can also be you as an individual yourself. So accept yourself, saying, okay, I am like this, but I would like to change. I would like to become better. Because the biggest thing that you have in your control is to change yourself. There's definitely a remote possibility for us to keep changing other people. We always think that it is possible, but in reality, that's extremely difficult. But what is really in your control is that you can change yourself. Accept that he or she, the way he or she acts or does is absolutely fine without wanting him or her to change. You accept and start to, embrace those things the way it is happening for you. And then finally is once you've started to accept is, once you start loving that individual for who he or she really is, once you start loving and understanding the way the individual behaves, probably there's a lot more comfort which comes into your mind. You start to respect the individual, you start to respect the situation, and you then don't get into judging yourself and then also judging the other individual. So that's what happens when we talk about the process. Okay, then looks for the positive. Look for the positive. Okay, so there's always, judgments are always negative. So what's important? Positive about the other individual, or maybe in that particular circumstance or situation, or for yourself. As I said, there are three parts to it. It's about judging self, it's about judging others, and the third part is judging the circumstance or situation. Please understand that there's something which is genuinely positive about the circumstance or situation. How can you really extract the positive without getting drained into the negative? That is what is important. Okay, instead of looking at what the other person is doing, focus on your own life, because the more you focus on your own life, the better it becomes. And finally is remember how it feels. If you're able to focus on your own life, and if you're able to reason out the details, saying, okay, I am really good and I can do things better, you will automatically start to feel a lot more positive. You will start to embrace yourself, and that's the beginning of another exciting journey. So on a closing note, one message for you is from Gautam Buddha himself. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. So stay blessed. Cheers and bye bye.